there's a big problem with how orphan and oil and the orphan and plugging well business takes place, and it's really a dirty business because really what you're able to do is you're able to freely transfer wells into a new P5. And for those listeners, a P5 is an operator's license. It gives you the
Right.
ability to operate, specifically like in the state of Texas, we call it a P5. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Thursday, April 3rd, 2025 edition of the Daily Energy Newsbeat. Stand up. Here are today's top headlines. First up, a big coal plant was just imploded to make way for an AI data center, not to be confused with a big salad for all my Seinfeld friends out there. Next up, it's time for Trump to get tough with Putin or get a new team and understand what is important to Putin. This is a very, very interesting article from Dennis Ross over at foreignpolicy.com. And, Stu being chief of staff to Putin, this will be very interesting to see what's next. Next up, another opinion piece from a great EMB contributor, Doug Sandridge. Colorado's first step towards energy sobriety. Highly recommend you sign up for Doug Sandridge's Substack. We'll have a link in the description below. And then finally, this is a big one that actually got sent to us by a good friend of the show, RT Trevino, last night. Trump halts historic orphan well plugging program. Boy, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. Stu will then toss it over to me. I will quickly cover what happened in the oil and gas markets today. We did see oil prices slightly tumble just recently, actually, in the afternoon session, but kind of up overall on the day. We did see EIA Crude Oil Inventories, 6.2 million barrel build. And then two interesting oil field. We, obviously Double Eagle closing with Diamondback a couple months ago on their M&A deal. That was Double Eagle 4. Double Eagle 5 is obviously was already up and running, but today has received a larger equity commitment as I think everybody expected. So we'll lightly touch on that. And then finally, super interesting, Chevron out of East Texas selling a majority interest in their East Texas gas assets to Tokyo Gas Company. A very interesting structure on this deal. So we will cover all that and a bag of chips, guys. As always, I am Michael Tanner, joined by Stuart Turley. Where do you want to begin?
Hey, let's start with a first story from the Wall Street Journal. A big coal plant was just imploded to make way for an AI data center. The article from the Wall Street Journal, Michael, is pretty darn cool. The site is in Homer City, Pennsylvania. Remember, this is in Pennsylvania. What's in the Pennsylvania? The Marcellus, which is about 50 miles east of Pittsburgh, is expected to house what would be the country's largest gas-fired power plant. Listen to this, up to 4.5 gigawatts. The plant could nearly power Manhattan. That's a big power plant. The plant will rely on natural gas from the Marcellus Shale, a major natural gas field. And this goes along with what I've been saying is if you're going to see AI data centers, you're going to see them either in the Haynesville or you're going to see them in Pennsylvania. And poof, here comes this story come rolling around there. What makes this site very unique, it checks all the boxes that you need for a data center, said Andrew Shanahan, partner at investment firm at Knighthead Capital Management, the majority owner. When you take a look at all the prices, but you take a look at also GE Vernona manufacturing facility is making the gas turbines. There is a limit on how many are going to be out there, dude. There is a shortage and there's very few that are going to be available here very quickly. ERCOT is the only grid section that is got enough bought and ready to rumble for the next several years. It's not that way across the U.S.
Yeah, no, I mean it's going to be very interesting. I think this 4.5 gigawatts is basically enough to power Manhattan, and so I think again it's all about letting the free market decide what's the best use, especially with these AI data centers. You're going to need power, but obviously natural gas is probably a better option than coal, especially in this scenario, considering the location of this. So, I mean, I'm on board with this. Again, I'm all about the private sector making decisions because they're going to make the most efficient and most economic decision for stakeholders. Anytime government gets involved, it tends to muddy the waters too much.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. But here's where I have a real warning, Michael. And that real warning is coming up. You're going to see just like the how much natural gas is going to be needed for contracts to support microgrids that are not supporting houses or the grid. This is going to be a huge issue. Look at Abilene, Texas, with that one that will support 90,000 homes. Well,
Mhm.
90,000 homes, that is not going to be going into the grid. This one may tie back into the grid, is what the article said. So,
Yes.
yeah, big, big difference.
Yep. All right. What's next?
Hey, it's time for Trump to get tough with Putin or get a new team and understand what is important to Putin. This was an excellent article, Michael, from a almost a left-wing group there, Dennis Ross, and they are a very interesting, the foreignpolicy.com. Sometimes they've got some really kind of wild ones. He brings up some very interesting points in this. Until now, Putin has not felt the need to do so. The irony is that Trump, if he's willing to really apply pressure and let Putin know our support for Ukraine will not change as long as he rejects acceptable outcome. Here's where it comes. In other words, Trump can use an American leverage combined with the Europeans because they want to control the bulk of the frozen Russian assets. Here's the big thing. President Trump has no leverage over President Putin because he's moved all of his business to Asia and he has absolutely no business reason. So, what President Trump needs to do is get a carrot. President Putin is not going to respond to getting hit in the head. He's a bonehead. He is not going to respond well to a shovel in the head. So, he needs a new team and needs to realize that. Make sense?
No, it makes sense. I think the part that I think becomes interesting is the energy component woven through this, because we covered last week
Yes.
about how Nord Stream is going to become a huge negotiating tool on one side or the other. And I mean, if I was Europe, I would be really interested in getting Nord Stream back online, because yeah, I still need to be buying natural gas from you at the US, but you shouldn't be dependent on any one source. So the fact that now
Exactly.
you have two options actually helps your economy a lot more than just now being reliant on the United States.
Exactly. In fact, Russia has actually lowered its price to the European through its pipelines because of US LNG coming through. So competition's a good thing, Michael. That thing is really good.
Yep.
But
All right, what's
let,
next?
Let's go to our buddy over there, Doug Sandridge. I actually enjoy all my time with Doug. He is a cool cat. Got a really good podcast coming out with him. The staff is now working on Colorado's first step towards energy sobriety. Michael, this is out of Colorado. It is a huge win. Governor Jared Polis signed HB 25 1040, which defines nuclear energy as clean energy under the Colorado revised statutes. This is really huge. I did not realize that Colorado was, I believe, number 8 in producing oil in the United States, but they are a very huge supplier of uranium. I did not know that. And also Grace Stanke had been in front of Congress several times, and Senator Liston and former America Grace Stanke testifying in support of the bill. It's pretty neat to see that she had been supporting the nuclear movement in Colorado. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I love Doug Sandridge, but let's not confuse him with Miss America. So we'll just need.
She's much. I've interviewed both of them several times, and so
No, I
she
know, but again, I think you've got two great minds here.
she's
Doug Sandridge is really on the forefront. Oil and gas executives for nuclear. Colorado is an energy powerhouse, and so the question is, will it move towards embracing nuclear? Because if it does, it's in a great spot. I mean, we know that there used to be a commercial nuclear power plant, as this article mentions, in Platteville. We also know that there was a governmental nuclear facility just north there in Arvada, very close to my neck of the woods when I was living back there. So there's a bunch of stuff there. I do think Colorado, for as crazy as it's gotten, has generally been on the right side of all of this energy stuff, and I enjoy seeing this stuff moving forward.
Oh, I do too. It's a breath of sanity in a insane state. Let's go to the next one here. Trump halts historic orphan well plugging program. This is really a huge story that RT sent to you. Billions of dollars approved by Congress to clean up abandoned wells have been frozen as part of the Donald Trump sweeping cuts. This has to get to Secretary Wright and Secretary Burgum on this. This is a very important thing because the amount of money that was available for plugging wells, and it was not just because they were called orphan wells. The program set aside 4.7 billion. A large sum for plugging wells was meant to supplement state level plugging efforts. So it's kind of like really stretching your dollars by helping out. The grants were distributed in 5.5 million to clean up abandoned wells in the state. California also received a 9 million grant. Sure, that went to like buses or the homeless in California, I bet. But I'm just kidding. That was a joke. But when you sit back and take a look at this, the orphan well program is going to be dwarfed here in a little bit. This is where they have undocumented orphan wells may emit nearly 63 million grams of methane per hour into the atmosphere. Here's where I disagree with this statement totally. They don't know how many undocumented orphan wells they have. This is almost like we have undocumented citizens in the United States voting in a government elections, and we know we don't. Yeah, we do. They're now on Social Security. So, I mean, no, how do you know how many it is? You don't even know how many it is, but we do
No,
need to plug them up.
there's a big problem with how orphan and oil and this orphan and plugging well business takes place, and it's really a dirty business because really what you're able to do is you're able to freely transfer wells into a new P5. And for those listeners, a P5 is an operator's license. It gives you the ability to operate, specifically like in the state of Texas, we call it a P5. And in order to have a P5, there's a bond you have to put up, and there's a limit. If you're under 100 wells, it's like 50,000. If you're above 100 wells, it's like 250,000. And so what that is supposed to do is that bond is supposed to be there as hey, these are funds set aside in case the state ever has to take control of the wells to go plug them. The problem is if you've got 99 orphaned wells and have only put up a $50,000 bond, it's much cheaper for an operator to abandon those wells, start a new P5, which they're allowed to do. I've seen it happen many times. Transfer the 3 good wells into that new P5, leave the 96 wells that suck under the old P5, and then just lose out on the 50 grand and then only have to put up a 50 grand bond here. Whereas if you had to plug all those wells, it would at least be a half, $750,000 to plug all those wells. So there is a shell game being played by operators. And this is where, to kind of contradict the statement I said earlier about how the private market will solve it. Well, the private market will solve it, and they'll solve it in an efficient way for stakeholders. The problem is some of the stakeholders in these orphan and abandoned wells aren't financially incentivized, aka wells that are in people's backyards, wells that are on people's ranches that are leaking. And we can't just have companies being able to freely move without any repercussions. So in theory, I like the idea. If we're going to spend money on cleaning up the environment, I'm not against plugging these certain wells. Now, I mean, you've given out $4.7 billion, and it says in this article, California, Colorado, Montana, New Mexico plugged 100 orphan wells. So,
That's nothing.
Cool. About $1 billion per. I mean, that's obviously it's less than that, but I mean, it's wildly inefficient. And I think this brings up the hard part of government money comes with stipulations. One, it's really hard to turn a profit on plugging a well because it's we use money because it's a reimbursement. So what do? You have people jack up prices. It becomes less efficient. There are ways, specifically ways that Stu and I have been and tossing around with our friends. There's ways to solve this. We went to a conference 6 months ago. They were talking about all of this stuff, but nobody had any answers. And really the answer is you got to incentivize operators to either keep these wells under their P5, increase a bond, which is going to be tough because you're going to put smaller oil and gas companies out of business, tax the heck out of large companies, because think about it. Chevron's only put up a $250,000 bond for their 10,000 wells. It's the same as your mom and pop that has 101 wells. So now Chevron's kind of maybe sliced and diced their assets, but it's all the same. So should Chevron and Exxon pay more? Should it be a per well fee? Should you have to put up, 5% of the plugging cost per well? There's that way to do it. Then there's this whole world of carbon credits. And that market is extremely early, is extremely green from the standpoint of it's undeveloped. There's a lot that needs to be worked out, but there's an interesting path down. Well, if you plug these wells, you could maybe be able to achieve carbon credits, which then you could go sell on the open market and a bunch of stuff like that. So I think there's all of these different ways there's a bunch of different ways you could go about solving the problem. Just handing out money is a solution, but is it the most optimal solution? I do think in some cases, getting the state to come in and plug high-valued wells, and when I mean high-value wells, I mean wells that are leaking on people's ranches, wells that are in people's backyards that are causing, soil contamination or that type of stuff. There is a need for we need to provide some state money to go plug some of these extremely onerous wells, but you have to figure out a way to incentivize the private sector to either solve this problem or put restrictions around or change the way, I don't want to say restrictions, but change the way you go about modifying these bonds because it's not working right now. Exxon and Chevron shouldn't have to pay the same amount of a bond as, Turley Energy Corp. It shouldn't happen.
Here's one thing I do want to say is that as we've tracked this and report on it, we need to let everybody know about it. But I also want to raise a gigantic issue that needs to be handled by the same people. The same Doug Burgum and Chris Wright need to also take a look at all the wind farms and solar farms that are coming offline in the next 5 years are going to be horrific. It's going to make the orphan wells look silly.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we need a lot of minds thinking about it. So I think
you bet.
We're going to keep having this as a conversation. Let's go overhead and jump into finance, guys. But before we do that, let's go ahead and pay the bills. As always, thank you for checking us out here on the world's greatest website, energynewsbeat.com. Stu and the team do a tremendous job making sure that website stays up to speed. Everything you need to know to be the tip of the spear when it comes to the energy and the oil and gas business. Go ahead and hit that description below. All the links to the timestamps, links to the articles. Check us out on Substack, theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. A great way to support the show. Go ahead and subscribe there if you feel the need and are so inclined. Go ahead and sign up for a paid subscription. It allows us to keep coming at you every single day. Stu is writing some tremendous paid-only subscriber articles. And if you like to go back and read old articles that we have posted, we only got about 2 weeks worth of them, and we're about to close that window to a week here. So we're really making a push there. So we appreciate all of our paid subscribers there. We'd also like to shout out Reese Energy Consulting for supporting the show. They do a tremendous job in the midstream space. If you're an oil and gas operator and you're not working with a marketing company, highly recommend calling Reese Energy Consulting. Tell them Energy Newsbeat sent you. They're going to come in and they're going to negotiate much, much higher margins on all of your oil and for first purchaser and natural gas contracts. You're losing out on 10, 15 cents on the gas side, and you could be losing out as much as $3 on the oil side. So highly recommend giving them a call. If you're in the LNG space, they know that left, right, backwards, and forwards, all of the regulations. They've got a great energy training for all different sectors. So we love them over there. ReeseEnergyConsulting.com. And finally, guys, if you are interested in getting into the oil and gas business and becoming Billy Bob Thornton from Landman, we've got some great resources for you at investin.oil.energynewsbeat.com. All the ways that you can, get a little bit of cash flow, get ahead on your 2025 taxes, which is key. It's never too early to start thinking about that. And then also, as always, be able to show up to a party and tell your friends you are now Billy Bob Thornton from Landman. So that's investin.oil.energynewsbeat.com. Let's go ahead and jump and look at the market. Stu, Liberation Day, we were all supposed to die. Markets were supposed to crash. We're going to be out on the streets. Whoops. S&P 500 up 0.6 of a percentage point. NASDAQ up 0.75 of a percentage point. So hardly Armageddon. 2 and 10-year yields did drop basically about 0.8 of a percentage point on both of them. Dollar index dropped about 4/10 of a percentage point. Bitcoin fairly flat, $84,000. Crude oil, is going to drop a little bit, closed at 71, but we'll probably, as we record this about 4:30 when it opens here in a bit, we'll probably be trading a little bit below 70 or a little bit below 71, somewhere in that 75 range. Brent oil was down about 0.5 percentage point, 74.22. Natural gas up about 2 percentage points, up to $4.05. And XOP, which is our E&P securities contract, was up about a full percentage point, 133.75. I think, obviously people are wondering what's going to happen with these reciprocal tariffs that came on today's what was known as Liberation Day, which I think people were taking multiple different ways. We did see the EIA also drop crude oil inventories, a 6.2 million barrel build. If we can go ahead and put that chart up there, pretty unbelievable relative to what we saw last week, which is a pretty big draw. I think that kind of tampered expectations there. But I think right now all eyes are on what's going on with oil prices and obviously the threat of secondary tariffs that could be coming on Russian oil. And then on Monday, there was some more sanctions that were tightened on Iran as part of their quote maximal pressure campaign to really drive down their oil exports. So all around pretty bearish on the crude oil inventory side, but I think the tariff side kind of balances everything out. Let's go ahead and jump over Double Eagle. We know that they went ahead and sold their V4 company to Diamondback about a couple months ago. They today announced an upsize offering with their V5 with about a 2.5 billion in equity committed from management team, Apollo, and obviously NCAP being their big backer. Their main focus is going to be across oil and gas, specifically in the Permian, but they also are teaming up with Tumbleweed 5, which will focus on some royalty and mineral investments, primarily in the Permian. So, we knew this was coming, but it'll be great to see them continue to roll out. It's going to be interesting to see what they end up purchasing, where they end up purchasing it. I think they're all the people keep saying all the good stuff's been taken, but with this type of capital, you got the ability to go in and really swing big and swing fast. So it'll be interesting to see where they end up. I think the other interesting thing we saw yesterday was Chevron announcing its sale of its majority interest in its East Texas gas assets. So they go ahead and sell a 70% interest in its East Texas gas assets to basically a company owned by Tokyo Gas Company and another international company called Castleton Commodities. Interesting deal structure. It's for $525 million, $75 million in cash, and a $450 million capital carry, which is meant to fund their portion of Haynesville development. Chevron in that deal actually sells a 30% non-operated working interest in a joint venture that they have and an overriding royalty interest in all the assets. Tokyo Gas and CGI will own approximately 93 and 7% in TGR, which is the company owning 70, which is the company that's buying the 70%. So they'll, most of its Tokyo Gas and Castleton Commodities will own a small 7%. It's as expected, according to the press release, to generate over $1.2 billion in value at current Henry Hub prices. Basically, if you include the capital carry, their retained 30% working interest and the overriding royalty interest, this is part of its plan to divest 10 to 15 billion of assets by 2028 in order to, quote, optimize their global energy portfolio, aka get themselves out of East Texas, which is not a non-core asset, and go ahead and invest more both offshore and then obviously onshore in the Permian. So very interesting deal structure. You don't see a lot of these, basically carried interest or capital carry on these type of deals, especially at Chevron's level. So this is, this could signal that companies with these large non-core asset stakes are kind of open for business and open to kind of, interesting deal structures. Because again, you normally wouldn't see this. Normally Chevron would say, we need all that cash up front. We're trying to divest. 10 to 15 billion of assets. We need that cash up front. They only got 75 million, but they're really getting 450 of a capital carry on the back end to fund that, their 30% interest. Right. So really fascinating deal structure. Love to see it. So maybe this will be something that changes up, but great for Chevron and TNG. What's up?
From Tokyo Gas, it's very important because they are buying LNG through that contract, and this is out of the Haynesville straight into the export facilities.
So you're talking about a vertically integrated system here, so we love to see it.
This is energy security for Japan. Very smart.
Yep, absolutely. Really, that's all I see, Stu. We've had a great week so far. We've got a couple cool things coming up on the podcast. You just had a great one with IBM that I think we'll be able to drop on Friday. I think we just got the live back, or I just saw we got the recording back from the team. So we'll be dropping that on Friday, I hope.
I don't know. I haven't even seen it yet, and we haven't turned it into the team yet. So
it's already we filmed it at the studio, so it's already done and cooked. And I just saw it come through the email before I sat down.
Well, I will do the best I can. So I've already got one teed out.
What's that?
It is one that we had at NAPE, and I can go tell you here in a sec.
We're still rolling. I mean, folks, we're the hardest working oil and gas media team in the business. We're still rolling out content from NAPE, and it's April.
That's right. Let's see here. It has just been complete, and just James Walker with Nano Nuclear went out today.
Yes.
And then we have Joe McClintock with Ilex Energy Corporation is already loaded into the system and is rolling.
Yes,
Friday.
Good old Joe. I've met him multiple times. It's a very interesting structure they have. So everyone should go check that one out.
And then we also have John Rogers coming out. We have Doug Sandridge and Georgia Talk Radio legend Martha Zoller. And I'm interviewing about 4 more people. So we've got a lot in the pipe, and I want to get that one from IBM out as soon as we can. So as soon as we can, we're going to roll it in.
Yep, the pipe is full. So, all right, guys. Well, with that, we're going to let you get out of here. Get back to work, finish up your week. We appreciate you guys sticking with us here on the Energy Newsbeat podcast. We hope you have a great week, and look for us to come out Friday. We'll have our weekly recap on Saturday. We'll take Sunday off and be back in the chair bright and early Monday. Guys, have a great weekend. We'll see you then.